So I want to begin by asking, who am I? Am I a spiritualist? Is spiritualism a religion? Or is it a philosophy? Now, these are some of the questions that I want all of you to bear in mind as we talk about the advent of modern spiritualism. Today, we celebrate and honor those in the past that made spiritualism what it is today, and how spiritualism's religion shaped the world and our community as we know it, and how important that is to know that. Now, we all know that throughout the history of human existence, there were writings of communication with spirit beings. And I know that, as many of you do, in many cultures around the world, there are practices of shamanism, many forms of worship, and different forms of communications have gone on. Now, in Asian countries like China and Korea, it's a common practice to honor your ancestors and believe in communicating with them through shamanism or people like that. If you look at the history in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and these all countries had various practice of some form of spirit communications as well. Now, in Europe, as late as the Middle Ages, we saw communication references with angels, saints, and other holy spirit beings. However, in modern spiritualism, and I say the word modern to differentiate from the past and ancient practice of spirit communications. Now, this modern spiritualism, as many of you know here, originated in the US in the 1840s, 1848 to be exact, and 50s. The Fox sisters form of mediumship that began on March 31st, 1848, sort of kind of went viral, to use today's terminology, and it spread so quickly all over, including Europe. Now, along with this event, it was the philosophical and religious writings of a man named Andrew Jackson Davis that impacted spiritualism as well. But still, on a wider scale, with sensational demonstrations of the Fox sisters, perhaps, which had so much impact, fast. Now, the Fox sisters and Andrew Jackson Davis lived in New York, but they were separated like 300 miles apart. They didn't know each other in the beginning. But in Andrew Jackson Davis' diary on March 31st, 1848, he recorded the following that tie these two events together, unbeknownst to Andrew Jackson Davis. And I've said this before, but at the time of his writing this, he said, "About daylight this morning, a warm breathing passed over my face, and I heard a voice, tender and strong, saying, 'Brother, the good work has begun. Behold, a living demonstration is born.'" Now, and of course, we know that the Fox sisters established communications with spirit in Hinesville, New York, on the evening of the same day. So, if you think about synchronicity, I mean, that's a very good synchronicity. Now, for those of you who want to find more about Andrew Jackson Davis, you can view it later on our YouTube Celebrate YouTube channel, for those who want to know more about him. A man known as the father of modern spiritualism, of course. So, why all of a sudden, back then, such intense interest and the movement of spiritualism happened back then, all of a sudden? And how far and wide did it go? Now, less than a decade after 1848, spiritualism back then was so widespread, it reached the Midwest and all the way out to California. Now, here's one interesting fact, which I liked, that I found. According to the state Indiana Historical Bureau of the Indiana State Library, by the 1860s, which is a couple decades after, 90% of a city named Angola, Indiana, all the residents were practicing spiritualists. 90%. Imagine that. Including people like Charles Cathcart. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He was a famous judge and a congressman at the time, ex-congressman at the time. He originally attended the seances circles as a skeptic, thinking there must be some kind of fraud going on, and he wanted to expose all these charlatans. Well, he became a spiritualist after himself taking a photo with a homemade flashlight that went off during the seance. He did that intentionally. And at that moment, he captured the furnitures in the house, the drums and the sticks, all flying about without tether to anything. At that instant moment when the flash went off in the photography. As a note, please do not take a flash photo of without permission in any type of circle, by the way, because we now know that you can really hurt people, including the medium. Let me just adjust the mic here. Now, at the turn of the 1900s, many well-known scientists, many people like Sir Oliver Lodge, one of England's highest, probably the most renowned scientist of all this time. Just like this Judge Cathcart, initially did not believe at all, and but later, after attending and finding out through experiments, that he became an ardent spiritualist. Now, some of you already know that of all people, the author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, with his character Sherlock Holmes, a detective, a crown jewel of rationalism and deductive thoughts in his character. Now, he became a spiritualist, Arthur Conan Doyle, and throughout his life famously defended spiritualism to the world and to the scientific community. And after that, he wrote many books on spiritualism. So what caused so much interest in the scientific community at the time with spiritualism? You can say that one apparent reason was the skepticism and the spirit mediums that popped up everywhere, of which many, sadly, many were complete frauds, of course. And they wanted to ride the wave of the sensationalism themselves and make money on the side. But many scientific experiments and research that was done by academia, groups, and organizations, they all back the findings as scientific fact. Now, some studies afterwards did not even want to go public and publish, even after proven as a fact. And that happened with the Harvard study. And after they proven as a fact, the professors did not want to publish it. Now, if you look up spiritualism, the first thing you will see, especially on our website or NSAC's website, you will see it first defined as spiritualism, the science, philosophy, and religion, in that order. Now, if I may go back in time, the religions worldwide at the time in the 18th and 19th century, they were faced with Western materialist philosophy, And at the same time, the religion were facing the decline of supernatural God theme of religion, because the science was breaking out at the time. And at that moment, it gave us the breakout, if you will, of the Protestant Reformation. These Reformation church wanted to move away from the so-called magic of traditional religion at the time. Now, however, according to one author, this is another book that in 1969, an author named Peter Berger, he wrote a book called The Social Reality of Religion. And he pointed out that Protestantism had become its own grave digger as a result of the logical extension of disbelief from the area of superstition to the question of existence of God. So, by its own design, Reformation Church at the time, the rationalist critique of Christianity seriously affected traditional belief. So, to some, a faith alone, or as it seems, didn't make it. So, the balance is what people wanted. And people were getting used to scientific beliefs, but they also wanted a belief in the supernatural with perhaps a deeper meaning of life. And what filled the gap? Spiritualism. Because spiritualism offered, as many of you know, proof of the survival of human personality after death, over and over and over again, by mediums and research and a group of scientists. Soon, this field of prominent and famous character people that investigated the phenomena of spiritualism, and all these people, scientists included, became a well-known spiritualist themselves. One prominent person was Alfred Wallace. Now, if you remember his name, he was the co-discoverer of evolutionary theory. Another person, Sir William Crook, Sir Oliver Lodge, and these are all famous scientists at the time. These people joined people like Arthur Conan Doyle, as mentioned, and Arthur Finlay in England, who wrote many books. Now, this is a science of spiritualism. Now, what about the philosophy of spiritualism? And how is it different from other religions, you might ask? Now, as shown in the aspect of science, spiritualism's religion is free of creed or dogma. It is progressive, meaning it is self-evolving as we live our lives with the understanding of natural law and spirit as the infinite intelligence that permeates all of our existence. With only 2 or 3 years of very little formal education as a child, Andrew Jackson Davis, the man I mentioned earlier as a father of spiritualism, became a prominent figure in spiritualism with his fantastic clairvoyance and particularly his trance mediumship. Now, under this series of trance mediumship lectures that he did, it was transcribed by another person and published into many books. In the one of the books, famous books, in the Principles of Nature, Her Divine Revelations and Voice to Mankind. This was written 1847, and the copy is still around, and you can still read that. He lays out his he called it harmonio philosophy in detail. He writes, God, scientifically considered, is the greatest fact in the universe. The greatest philosophically is an infinite cause. Nature is an infinite effect. So we have cause and effect that he's talking about. And the object for the accomplishment of which the whole was thus constituted, universe, and is the infinite use or end. God is the positive mind. All else is negative. So this is what he wrote. Davis also considered God to be consciousness of the universe, the meaning of the universe, the great positive mind as a cause, develops nature as an effect, cause and effect, once again. And this to produce the human spirit as the ultimate reality. Now, Davis' model sort of forms the basis of what spiritualism, mainstream spiritualism thoughts. Regarding our ultimate reality, speaking on the universal reality that he's talking about, the teaching given by Spirit Guide, I mentioned him before, Silver Birch, through the mediumship of the medium Maurice Barbanel in England, he calls the great white spirit, and he's talking about white spirit as in light spirit, is infinite. And we are parts of the same great spirit. Silver Birch also mentions there is no personal God apart from the one that human beings have created. There is no personal devil apart from the one that human beings have created. There is no golden heaven, no fairy hell. Now this for me is precisely what I was believing and knowing from the get-go. So all this is music to my ears. Of course, we cannot prove the existence of God or the nature of this reality. But as in Silver Birch and Andrew Jackson Davis, both teachings, we can gather some philosophical understanding with natural laws and spiritual laws. Now, once again, this involves subjecting our mind, into a rational examination and never taking any messages, spirit or otherwise, as truth, unless you're okay with it. That's spiritualism. Ask yourself, whenever someone tells you something or guides, supposedly, does it agree with what we know about the nature of the universe through scientific studies? And is it consistent? So nowadays, some of the exciting findings and research in quantum fields research look and feel and sounds more like spiritualism. And why wouldn't it, right? I'll be more surprised if it didn't. So what is the role of spiritualists? We do not make anyone a convert, but through example and knowing, we spiritualize ourselves. We are not becoming to man's religion, but to spiritualize following the spiritual and natural law, which is unchangeable and immutable. Now, then you have to ask yourself, when this spiritualism was coming around, do we need another religion? Is spiritualism a religion? Now, I want to argue that spiritualism is a religion only by a technical design, but more of a philosophy for humanity. To spiritualize every sentient being on this planet is to say that one day we no longer need any religion. Some or portion of it is perhaps humanity's misguided words of a preferential group of men and women to separate, to stigmatize, and to shackle our minds of humanity. We deserve to be free from fear and hate-based living. And once we become fully engaged in loving thoughts only then can we transcend and change the paradigm of the spiritual living with all its glory and soulful existence. These things are indeed possible with spiritualism, which was in the past and is now and will be in the future. Thank you.